Welcome to Networking Unleashed, Building Profitable Connections. I'm your host, Michael Forman, speaker, author, and your guide to turning conversations into revenue. Today's guest is someone whose work has transformed how the world thinks about success through giving. Bob Berg, co-author of the international bestseller, The Go-Giver, and author of the timeless classic, Endless Referrals. We're diving deep into what it really means to network with purpose, how generosity becomes your greatest business strategy, and why authentic connection always outperforms the hard sell. So buckle up, Buttercup, because today's conversation isn't just about building a network, it's about building authenticity, legacy, level, influence. So let's get started. I would like to introduce Bob Berg to the podcast. And I have to tell you that since day one of my professional career of speaking, I've always followed the footsteps of Bob Berg. So if you love me, you have him to thank. If you hate me, don't hate him. Okay. But here it goes. Bob, welcome to the podcast. And give us a little bit about your background because I'm sure that the listeners may not have heard it, but I'm very interested myself.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you for your service to our country as well. I so greatly appreciate it, and thank you for the wonderful work you're doing in the world of networking, and you're adding a lot of value to the lives of a lot of people. So thank you for having me on your show. Yeah, I started out as a broadcaster, first in radio doing sports, then in television doing news. I wasn't really that good at it and wasn't long for that profession. So I went into sales, which was one of those things you typically, at least back in my day, you didn't grow up saying, "Hey, I think I'm going to be a sales professional." It's something you usually fell into. And I knew nothing about it. And so I failed miserably for my first few months until one day I was in a bookstore, and this is 40 plus years ago. And back then, it wasn't like today where this kind of material just people know about. Back then, if you didn't know, you didn't know, right? So I go into a bookstore looking for something. I didn't know what. I didn't even know there were books on how to sell. And I saw two books. One was by Tom Hopkins, the other was by Zig Ziglar, two of the icons, of course, in our sport, sales. And I got those books, and I like to say I didn't read them, I devoured them. And I would just go home after work every night and study into the wee hours of the morning and take notes and underline and highlight and rehearse. And I mean, I just studied. I just embraced it. And within a few weeks, my sales really began to go through the roof. Now, that was interesting to me because there certainly wasn't a big change in me personally in those 3 weeks. But what I had that I didn't have prior was a methodology, a system, if you will. And I personally define a system as the process of predictably achieving a goal based on a logical and specific set of how to principles, the key being predictability. If it's been proven that by doing A, you'll get the desired results of B, then you know that all you need to do is A and continue to do A, and you'll get the desired results of B, much how you teach a networking system. If your clients follow it, they're going to succeed. And so this was really a turning point for me. But what was really awesome was when I realized that I needed to get all these personal development books, right? Again, I knew nothing about this. But now in every book, and I'm reading on sales, and back then cassette tapes that I started buying on sale, and what they're telling you, you've got to read How to Win Friends and Influence People, and Think and Grow Rich, and The Magic of Thinking Big, and Psycho-Cybernetics, and all these amazing books. I was a horrible student in school. I'm now getting an education and was loving it. And what I came to realize was that success is really an inside job. You've got to grow into that person who can, of course, it manifests itself outwardly, but it begins in here in the mind and then into the in the heart. And I just love that. I was learning things that I just never knew before. And so really that's how all that started. And eventually I was sales manager of another company years later and yada yada, moved from that to teaching sales and communication skills and blah blah blah. And now we're here today.
That's right. And your work, you haven't touched upon your work. And I understand that you're work, your body of work with networking and communication is legendary. Okay, you might be poo-pooing it right now, but it is bigger than life, and you had quite an extensive background.
Thank you.
So, just by saying that, let me dive into this. How do you personally define networking, and how was that definition evolved throughout your career?
Yeah. And I tend to define everything. So I'm glad you asked because to me, defining terms is so important because the definition is the very premise from which you operate. And I think I'm paraphrasing Ayn Rand when by saying if your premise is false, it can never result in a correct conclusion. So I always like to define terms so we're all in the same facing the same direction. And I define networking as simply the cultivating of mutually beneficial give and receive win-win relationships. The focus, of course, the italic, if you will, is on the give part because that's really where it starts. As you teach, you've got to look for ways right from the beginning to bring value, to focus on bringing value to others and be able to communicate that value in a way that person sees it as being of value. And yeah, I think when we go by that definition, where we tend to now we're in a position to do the right things that help develop that network.
I absolutely agree. And the way that I promote networking is I always say go into it with a servant's heart.
Exactly.
Always look to give. Forget about receiving. If you're going to sell something at a networking event, don't bother going. Okay, you're going to look to have a servant's heart. And but my ever faithful line is to say, I like you, what you're doing, I like how you're doing it. How can I make you more successful?
Whatever.
How can I make be a good referral source for you? And if I did my job correctly, they'll turn around and say, Mike, I don't even know what the hell you do yet. Oh, I was talking and talking, but I
They
think of
want
it
to
as
know.
the same.
They want to
Absolutely.
know because of your focus on them, which is so key.
Absolutely.
I think one of the fastest things I learned in sales, and this is as I started getting on the phone a lot and doing phone prospecting and building relationships on the phone and closing sales on the phone, what I discovered is nobody ever hung up the phone on me while they were talking. Really interesting thing. If I'm talking about myself and the company and how long we've been in business and our product and service this and blah blah blah, but if they're talking about themselves, they are engaged. And all of a sudden they become interested. It's that old saying that both of us know, and that is if you've ever been in a conversation with someone who let you do practically all the talking, didn't you come away from that conversation saying to yourself, wow, what a fascinating conversationalist that person was?
That's right.
Yeah. And when we ask the right questions, such as the one that you just mentioned, yeah, we're a fascinating conversationalist. Yeah.
That's right. That's so true. That's so true. Okay, so let me get to the next question. You've spoken about the golden rule of networking. What does that mean in practice, and how
Mm.
can professionals live it out authentically, not transactionally?
Yeah. So what I call the golden rule of business of sales of networking is all things being equal, people will do business with and refer business to those people they know and trust. Here's the thing, and we talk about this in law number 3 of John David Mann's in my book, The Go Giver, that the fastest, most powerful, most effective way of eliciting those type of feelings toward you, those know and trust feelings toward you from others, is by genuinely and authentically moving from an I focus or me focus to an other focus, a focus on them. Or as Sam, the mentor in the story, advised Joe, make your win all about the other person's win. And people say, is that realistic though? Focusing on them. It's interesting because back in the days when I was on the road, I'm 67 now, I don't get on planes or anything. But back in the day, when I would be at sales conferences and addressing a room full of sales professionals, one of the first things I'd say is, nobody's going to buy from you because you have a quota to meet. No one's going to buy from you because you need the money or you want to hit a sales goal. And they're not even going to buy from you just because you're a really nice human being. And I know you are. No, they're going to buy from you. They're going to do business with you because they believe that they will be better off by doing so than by not doing so. So the most powerful thing, the most productive thing you can do as a salesperson, and this is whether you're in a sales conversation, whether you're in the prospecting process, or whether you're meeting a new networking connection that you with whom you're going to have a great mutually beneficial give and receive win-win relationship. It's to take your focus off yourself. It's to put your self-interest to the side. That doesn't mean you deny your self-interest. It doesn't mean, no, we live in reality. We're as subject to human nature as every other human, right? But as a professional and as a networker, we put our self-interest to the side, put it aside, and absolutely make your focus about them. And that's when the magic happens. And again, it comes from an authentic place. You really do care.
This is golden because you are saying and re-emphasizing everything that I've always believed in and everything I teach, I
Sure.
coach, that I train on. And I wish my listeners would really pay attention to what you are saying because it's golden.
You
Uh,
probably tell them the same thing but when someone else says it, it's always the same thing with all of us, right? We can say something
Absolutely.
to those we love, but when someone else says it, it's, oh, can you believe it?
Just ask my kids because if I tell them something right through the right, but if
Yeah,
somebody else tells them, they're
yeah,
like, "Oh, you know what, Dad? Did you hear what he
yeah,
said?" I'm like, "What do you think I've been saying for the last?" All right,
yeah.
okay. The term "go giver" challenges traditional sales and networking mindset. What does being a go giver look like in a daily business transaction?
Yeah. So when we say go giver, okay, what John David Mann and I are really talking about is that person who has learned, or perhaps always intuitively knew, that shifting your focus, and I think this is really the key, that shifting of that focus from getting to giving. Now, when we say giving in this context, we simply mean constantly and consistently providing immense value to others, understanding that doing so is not only a more fulfilling way of conducting business, it's the most financially profitable way as well. And not for any kind of way out there, woo, magical, mystical reasons. Oh, just give and good things. What? No, it's actually much more rational than that. When you're that person who can take your focus off yourself and place it on serving others, discovering what they need, what they want, what they desire, when you can make it not about you, but about helping them to overcome their problems and challenges. When you take the focus off yourself and focus instead on moving them closer to happiness, now people feel good about it. They feel great about you, right? They want to get to know you better. They begin to like you and they trust you, right? They want to be in a relationship with you. They want to do business with you if they need what you offer. But here's the thing, they want to tell the world about you. They want to be your personal walking ambassador. And that's really what it looks like when you create those kinds of relationships on an ongoing basis.
Absolutely. And what you said in the beginning was when you bring value to them, because with all these LinkedIn connections and everything else, the worst thing you want is somebody to walk up to you and hand you a business card and hand you everything. You're not showing them value. So the
Right.
first two or three or even four times that you want to connect with somebody, they want to do business with, give them something, give them value.
Yeah.
It's what it shouldn't that be that difficult, that it should be easy, and actually it'll be quite fulfilling.
You bring up a great point too. And when you talk about that value that you're giving them, what's always so important, and again, I guess this goes back to definitions, but it's like, what is value? And often when we talk about value, we talk about it in comparison to price, because a lot of people, I think, look at those as being interchangeable, and they're really not. Price is a dollar amount, it's a dollar figure, it's finite, it is what it is. Now, value is the relative worth or desirability of a thing, of something to the end user or beholder. In other words, what is it about this thing, product, service, concept, idea, what have you, that brings so much worth to another human being that they will, whether it's exchanging money for it or being interested in it or wanting to be, whatever it happens to be. And that's the key, that value is always in the eyes of the beholder. It's not what we think is of value or what we think they should think is of value. It's what they do.
Absolutely.
And that's
Absolutely.
why, as you teach, that's why you've got to ask questions and really listen, because
Yeah.
we're not them, they're not us. So we don't know what they value.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's like when you deal with classic cars, you may be a Camaro guy, a Mustang guy, and you might say, "Oh, look at that 65 Mustang. It's beautiful. I'll pay $30,000 for it." And somebody next to me would say, "I wouldn't pay you more than two because it's a car." It's your perception, it's how you
Right.
perceive it. And that is so correct, so on point that as long as you realize it, you have to convey that to your prospective client. And you have to, we're problem solvers. You have to see what problem they have so we can solve it. And you're not going to find that out unless you ask those questions.
And I think that's why, even in a sales conversation, the discovery is the most important part, because that's where you are discovering their needs, their wants, desires, their problems, their challenges, their strengths, their weaknesses, their opportunity, and all the thing, and being able to really find out what's important to them. And it's
Yes,
only from that context that you're able to actually communicate value.
absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. In a world focused in a world focused on metrics and ROI, how can professionals give value first without feeling like they're losing ground or being taken advantage of?
Okay, so I think there are two things there. So let me go to the first one first, and if I forget the second part, the taking advantage of, just remind me, okay?
Okay,
So the
okay.
first one is metrics and so forth. And people say, so Bob, when you and John talk about the go-giver and placing the other person's interests first, focusing on value, and one of the things John and I say in our the follow-up book, Go Givers Sell More, is that money is simply an echo of value. It's the thunder, if you will, to value's lightning, which means the value must come first, and the money you receive is simply a natural result of the value you've provided. So people say, so are you saying the metrics don't matter? Are you saying goals, you shouldn't make goals? Are you saying that there shouldn't be? No, we're not saying any of that. Though all those are fine and they serve a terrific purpose. What we're saying is nobody's going to buy from you because of those metrics and your goals and your KPIs and your this and your that. They don't care. They don't care. So if your focus is on so when you put all this together and you know that in order to have so many sales happen, the chances are you're going to have X amount of sales conversations, right? And to do that, you're going to have X amount of prospecting calls where you connect with people. And for that, you're going to have to make so many calls or whatever you do with emails or going to me or whatever it happens to be. Okay. Fine, of course. Do those so that the actions you need to take. Actions are important, but what we're saying is they're not buying because of that. Okay.
They're not going to
So
buy.
yeah, so there's no dichotomy between between metrics and focusing on value to them. No, one works with the other. Money is an echo of value. It just means your focus must be on them in order to hit those goals and so forth. Now, you talked about being taken advantage of, and I
Right.
think that's I think that's like the premise being go giver. It means you're giving all the time. Are people going to take advantage of you? The short answer is anyone can be taken advantage of, and there are people in the world who will take advantage of other people, right? But there's no natural alignment between being a go giver and being taken advantage of. Being a go giver doesn't mean you're setting yourself to be taken advantage of. Being a go giver simply means you understand that your job is to focus not on yourself, but focus on providing immense value to others. It doesn't mean you should be anyone's doormat. It doesn't mean you should be a martyr. And it doesn't mean you should be self harmful by any means. No, it just means you deal with people in such a way that you understand your job is to provide them with value. Now, if someone it finds themselves in a pattern of being taken advantage of, then it's important for them first to acknowledge that and understand that's a thing, because we can never overcome a problem we don't realize we have. Okay, so we need to take the unconscious and make it conscious. But if that's the case, then it's determining, why am I doing that? Why am I placing myself in it? Because if you're being taken advantage of constantly as a pattern, it's not because you're a nice person. It's not because you're a giver. Okay. It's because you're doing things in a certain way that is creating an environment and a context for people to take advantage of you. So once you understand that and recognize it and acknowledge it, now it's asking yourselves, and it might even be asking a professional counselor to help work you, or a coach, of course, like yourself, to help work through it. Okay. And so why is this happening? What is it that I have going on in my unconscious that's causing me to feel as though I deserve to be taken advantage of? Or what unconscious payoff am I getting? Is it a way that I can say, I would be successful, but I give so much and all these people take advantage of me? Or is it that you're not equipped to know when again, I don't know. Everyone's different. But it's always, nobody gets up in the morning and says, hey, I think I'll try to find someone to take advantage of me today. No, it's totally unconscious, but it needs to be worked through. But there's nothing about that aligns with being a go-giver.
Absolutely. And it can boil down to something as simple as body language, what you're doing, or how you're closing off the other person. And it gives them that feeling of distrust, because to know you trust you, that
Sure.
trust factor is so important that if you're giving off this vibe that you're untrustworthy, no matter what you do, you have to change. You have to change. Okay. What's the difference between giving for reciprocity and giving for impact? How do you keep your intentions clean in a results driven business world?
I think that comes down to what John and I, and again, we talk about this in Go Givers Sell More, which is the only book in the series that's not a parable. It's more of an application guide to the original Go Giver, because that is a question that comes up a lot, and it's a good question. There's a treacherous dichotomy, or you could say a false dilemma. What is a false dilemma? It's the unnecessary use of the word or. We hear that when we're a kid. Hey, when you grow up, do you want to be wealthy or happy? Yes.
Yes.
It's not an either or. And it says, are you a giver or are you a receiver? And that would be like saying, hey, do you breathe out or do you breathe in?
Yes.
We breathe
Yes.
out, which is giving. We also have to breathe in, which is receiving. So the giving of value is something, yeah, we do from the heart, and we do because it's part of us, and because we want to make a difference in people's lives, and we tend to do that through the product or service that we're providing. Absolutely. And when we do that, we open the door to be able to receive. What a great thing that is. The
Yep.
key is to give value without attachment to the results. Now, some people say give without expectation. I think I know what they mean. I think more they mean without attachment, because I want people to have positive expectation. I want you to know that if you are genuinely and authentically providing value and touching lots of people's lives and placing their interests first and coming at it from an authentic, that you've created that benevolent context for your success, for being able to receive. Right? I want you to expect that, but it doesn't have to be from that person or any person in particular. But the big thing is to do it without attachment to the results. What's attachment? It's an emotional demand that this happens. That is out of our control. And we learn from the Stoics, right?
Absolutely.
We focus on what we can control. What can we control? The amount of value that we touch people's lives with, right? But we
Yes.
also know that as we do this, you can't help but have it come back to you. Now, you've got to be open to receiving. You've also got to breathe in. You can't feel guilty about it. And unfortunately, the world around us has provided so many anti-prosperity messages that make one feel guilty for earning a lot of money. But if you've earned this through providing value to the marketplace, that's great. It's wonderful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And actually, what you just said goes back to the beginning of this podcast, when I say you have to go in with a servant's heart.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. No expectations of them giving back to you, but you know that they're going to give back to you because listen, if I refer two people and put them together, they're going to feel compelled. Michael, he referred us, so I should really refer him. So
Well,
it
it
may
really
work.
opens them up to just, they feel good about you. Again, they
Yeah.
feel great about you. They know and
Yes.
trust you. And just from their own, even from their own self-interest, they know this guy's a great guy. He really cares about helping me in my business. He's somebody I know him, I like him, I can trust him. You're again, John David Mann and I call it creating the benevolent context for your success. And when that's there, everything good happens, but you just can't be attached to it having to happen. And that's the trick.
Yep, it sure is. It sure is. You said so. You've written extensively about endless referrals.
That was my
What?
first one, yeah.
Yep. What's the secret to creating a network that continually produces opportunities without it feeling forced?
Yeah, I think it's, and when I wrote Endless Referral, and this is back, there's been a few different editions out, but the first one was back actually in the 90s. That's how long I've been around. I almost hate to say that, but yeah, I think 1994, Endless Referrals came out. And really, I wrote that for uh, entrepreneurs and sales professionals who knew they had a great product or service. They knew it brought lots of value to their customers, but they didn't necessarily feel comfortable or confident going out into their local communities and developing those kinds of relationships that you teach that cause people to want to do business with them directly and or refer them to others. So it was really just it was a how-to guide for them to be able to do that confidently by again focusing on others, having conversations with people where you ask them about themselves and where you developed a great, and then the follow-up system, follow through system, and developing those know and trust relationships. And then when you do business with them, either directly or they refer you to someone else. And again, we need to be able to ask in a correct professional way that helps them to. And when you do that, it just happens that you continually expand the number of people who are open to having a sales conversation with you, right? And what happens is the more people that you have in that now in that sphere of influence, both directly and through referrals, the more confident you feel.
Yeah.
And you're talk about attachment. You have no attachment to people who say no because it's okay. You've got lots of people to talk to. We always say when they say no, you say next, but you don't say it out loud. It's probably not a good idea. But in your mind, you're thinking, okay, it's too bad. You prefer they be interested. And if they are, great, but you're not attached to it. And when that happens, not only do you feel more confident, but they actually find themselves more attracted to you as a salesperson. Nobody really wants to do business with someone who seems to need them too much. But when you are okay with their not buying, when you no longer have commission breath because you're not worried about one person, now they're maybe a little more interested and they're wondering why. And even if not, it doesn't matter because you have that confidence. And so, as you're able to continue to create new relationships and create referrals from the know and trust relationships, you have an ever expanding sphere of people you can share your business with.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I consider the networking as my social currency.
Yeah.
As the money, it's not a dollar value, but it's the currency that when I go walk into a prospective client, I have a certain amount of social currency behind me. And I'm not starting in a negative, and I'm not starting flat. I'm starting well above because
Ah,
I've given them value first. So that increased my social currency. That's my train of thought. But I say trust is the currency of networking. What are the
I love that.
fastest ways to build it and the quickest ways to lose it?
The quickest way to build it is to be trustworthy and follow through on what you say you're going to do.
Absolutely.
I think when you do that, you've got it. And of course, the quickest way to lose it, oh my gosh, is to in some way break that trust through an action that is just not in integrity, if you will.
Absolutely. In other words, you don't come through with what you had promised, or you say, "Oh, I forgot all about that. Let me get to it," or you just dismiss it, and you lose that trust really quick.
Ugh,
And it once you lose it, it's twice as difficult to get it back.
oh,
It,
sure.
so you always want to keep your social currency in a positive.
Oh, yeah.
Do digital platforms and AI fit into the go-giver philosophy? And and generosity and technology truly coexist in networking today?
It's interesting because when social media started to really become a thing, and when was that? About 15, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years
Uh,
ago, maybe?
About 15, yeah.
Yeah, so I remember one of the questions I was often asked was, so Bob, with this new technology, can people really create relationships online? And one of the ways I'd answer is when I first started in sales back in the whatever it was, early 80s, what have you, I said, I used to use this tool of technology to reach out, to prospect, create relationships, right? And this technology was called the telephone. And in the telephone itself gave us an opportunity to reach out to people you wouldn't have been able to reach out to other than if you had a telephone. But just having a telephone didn't mean you were going to be able to create a relationship with someone. And it was the same with social media. Okay. Social media gave us an opportunity, I think, to reach out and connect with people we never would have been able to without social media. But that didn't create the relationships. That didn't strengthen it. It just gave us the opportunity to. When we talk about all things being equal, people do business with, not with those computers they know and trust, but with the people behind them. And I think it's the same with AI and with whatever else comes down the pike. We use it, just say you use money and love people, right? Instead of love money and use people, right? It's the same thing. Use the technology and love people, right? The technology
Absolutely.
is never the end result. The technology is the means to the end. The end is creating a relationship. So
I
you
always,
utilize it
yeah,
for that purpose, but you don't try to make that the purpose.
absolutely. I always say that AI is great for what it does. You use it as a tool, something you
Ooh,
put in
it's a
your
tool.
tool belt. And even through Zoom, you have to realize that, all right, I'm talking to you, but I have to realize that you're a person and that I have to deal with you that way.
Yeah,
So you're still dealing with people. Okay,
exactly.
so what advice do you give people who do, I'm sorry, who do give first, but
Mhm.
feel like their generosity isn't being reciprocated? And how do you keep them encouraged?
So I would say this is a 95-5 thing. And let me explain what I mean.
Okay.
Most of the time, when people tell me I'm giving so much value to others, but I'm not getting anything back, my first question is, are you sure that you're giving value to them in a way that they feel is of value? Okay. Because you might be doing things that you would feel is of value, but it doesn't mean they do. Okay. So that's the first. And that's 95% of the time when we do a diagnostic, that's it. The other 5% is simply they're not able to receive what they have earned. And again, that goes into the mental state and the emotional state and so forth. But most of the time it is that they're thinking they're giving. And if they're calling themselves generous, they're probably not.
Very good. Yes, correct. Correct. Okay, let's bring this podcast full circle. If every listener applied one principle from work starting today, what long term shift do you believe they could make in their business and their life?
Oh, I think that if you totally embrace the fact that, and Dale Carnegie said this in his classic How to Win Friends and Influence People almost, what, 90 years ago now or whatever. And I thought this sentence was the underlying premise of his entire book, entire teaching. And it's where he said, ultimately, people do things for their reasons, not our reasons. If we will embrace that element of human nature and know that we must focus on them and make it about them, we're 9 steps ahead of the game in a 10-step game.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Wow, what a masterclass in connection, generosity, and purpose.
Oh,
A
thank you.
huge thank you to Bob Berg for joining us and reminding us that success isn't about what we get from others, but what we give them that makes the difference. If you love today's episode, share it with someone in your network who needs a little inspiration to give more, connect deeper, and grow stronger. And remember, networking isn't a numbers game, it's a value game. Until next time, I'm Michael Forman, and this is Networking Unleashed, building profitable connections. Stay connected, stay generous, and keep turning those conversations into profit. Bob, before we leave, I want to ask you, if somebody wanted to get hold of you, whether just to talk about the book or to be coached or given something to go on a straight, give a direction, where should they contact you?
Yeah, best place is Berg. And while they're there, if they'd like, they can subscribe to my weekly or my daily impact newsletter that I send out 5 times a week.
I want to know that after I connected with you, that was the first thing I did.
Oh, thank you.
And I read it every day.
Ah,
Every day, and it's something, it's so each day is better than the last. If you're looking for something on a daily basis, just subscribe to that newsletter. Bob, I cannot thank you enough for coming on this podcast. I gained so much knowledge. I realized that we are so much on the same level, not same level, you're far
sure.
above me,
No, we absolutely are. Absolutely.
but
And same level, same wavelength, and we're all learning from one another.
yes, we are. I thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Michael.
Well, hold on, folks. Don't go anywhere. Let's hear from our sponsors. David Neal, co founder, Revved Up Kids. Revved Up Kids is on a mission to protect children and teens from sexual abuse, exploitation, and trafficking. They provide prevention training programs for children, teens, and adults. To learn more, go to revvedupkids.org. Henry Kaplan, Century 21. When it comes to making the biggest financial decision of your life, leave it in the hands of a proven professional, Henry Kaplan. Henry is a global real estate agent with Century 21, celebrating his 41st year in business. No matter where you're moving, Henry has the right connections for you. You can contact Henry at 561 427 4888. A huge thank you to our guest for sharing such incredible insights today. And of course, a big shout out to you, our amazing listeners, for tuning in and spending your time with us. If you're interested in my digital courses, being coached, or having me come and talk to your company, just go to Michael and fill out the request form. Remember, networking isn't about being perfect, it's about being present. So take what you've learned today, get out there, and make some meaningful connections. If you've enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with someone who could use a little networking inspiration. Let's keep the conversation going. You can find me on Apple, Spotify, Pandora, YouTube, or my website, forman.com/podcasts.